Hi guys, welcome to this video, and in today's video I'm going to be talking to Justin Biddle. He is from Shopware and he deals with some of the complaints that are raised in my previous video, which I said, maybe don't install Shopware. And it addresses some of the concerns that were raised initially by, for example, features and other things. So some things he said were fair criticisms and they'll take them on board and move forward. And of course, with other things, so I'm going to show you that video now. And if you want to enjoy more videos like this, like and subscribe now so you can get more free content about development. And we give you the insights on some of these larger companies and where they're progressing to.
So I obviously the reason why we got in touch was because I think there was we wanted to have a chat with you because as a result of the video you posted a few weeks back. I don't know. I just clear the air, and obviously every man is entitled to his opinions and as to what is right and what is wrong, and you are as entitled as anyone. And you are.
I always like to think of myself as not entitled, but
No, I mean, what I mean is entitled is the wrong word. Well, it's the right word, but it's quite often used wrongly. And we are all, we're all allowed. It's just, people have different views of different things. Some people think some things are good and some other things are bad. And also, when it comes down to it, we all hear things. We hear, everything is kind of subjective out here, if you like. And I know what you're trying to do is an honourable thing, which is to try and bring some measure of objectivity to this whole thing, and that's great. And I obviously something got your goat around Shopware, or someone got some friends of yours goat around Shopware. And what we would love to do is ensure that if there's a real problem, that we understand it and that therefore we can deal with it. And if there isn't a real problem, that we sort of tell you, what does exist, what the situation is, if you like, and how we normally respond to it, and then you can once again make up your own mind as to whether that's good or bad, and then inform your audience accordingly. Hopefully, that was my ambition today, is to just literally have a chat, find out what the hell's going on, find out what's underlying here, and if we can address it, great. And if not, then that's we can't win them all.
We'd like to. Everyone would.
Hello. Well, actually, true. No. Well, I know what you mean. Yes, of course we would. But actually, that's part of the secret here. And you've said that yourself, I think, in some of your videos. Is that there's no bad platform out there. It's just some platforms are better for some merchants than they are for others. And depending. And I have a whole methodology which I hand out to consultants and our agency partners as well, which I'm happy to make available to you. Which is a kind of a scorecard methodology, because I think that for any selection of a platform, there are 12 or 13 what I call global criteria that a merchant should take into account. And that is total cost of ownership. How big is the agency infrastructure? What's the feature set? How extendable is it? What performance can it deliver relevant to me? And a bunch of other stuff as well. And different platforms rate better on different things, and depending on what's the most important, how that merchant weights those different criteria, depends on which platforms come to the fore. And we don't think we cannot come to the fore in every situation, and part of I think delivering a good service to your segment is about understanding what your segment is, where you deliver a service, and try and deliver a service best you can to that audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Like for example, it wouldn't be, that's why I thought this would be a good opportunity to get your side of things, because it's only fair for me to listen to, let's say, one party that's, wasn't too happy with some things. They weren't happy with every, with
No, sure.
quite a lot of it. They did like a lot of it. They did have some compliments, like the front end runs incredibly fast. Of course, you're using the framework that I love, Vue, which I have a great endeavor for. You've got a good architecture, which I complimented in my first video about all the different marketing platforms.
Truth is,
so there's definitely some,
I think you did in your second video too.
The second video was after that point, so it's only fair to listen to your side.
The truth is the second video wasn't entirely negative. I mean, obviously there were two things that came out. One was the area of support, and the other one seemed to be around bulk updaters and stuff like that you thought should be in the platform. And truth is, I would agree with you.
There's some questions around those things mainly. Yeah,
sure. And from the bulk updata point of view, it's actually in one of the upcoming releases anyway. I would have loved it. I've spent a lot of time talking to our partners, finding out, how we prioritize the roadmap going forward, because when you bring out a new product, you can't have everything out at the very beginning. It kind of has to evolve. Shopware 6 is actually quite a new product. It is something that's developing and evolving all the time, both from what we deliver in terms of functionality and from what our partners, and collaborators in the platform, because it's an open source platform, as you know, deliver too. The strength of our, what does they say? One of our new employees, a guy called Ben Marks, said, the funny thing about open source coding standards and code is that the least exciting thing is the code. It's just that isn't the thing that's interesting around it. The exciting thing is the communities and the collaboration that you build around that network.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like that was one of the main reasons why Shopware took my interest, was because it was based around that open principle. It's got the right kind of architecture. One of my compliments towards the platform definitely is the front end and the back end are reusable and interchangeable. And if something like Magento was to come along, or any other platform that wants to go fully headless like you guys are, then unfortunately a lot of their marketplace code and all that code is so tightly coupled with the back end that they just aren't able to do that, because you'd lose all of your marketplace nearly overnight. So one of my major questions is, from Shopware 5 to Shopware 6, how has there been a drastical change, or is there a real step forward? How have you progressed through that?
It's a completely different platform. They are chalk and cheese. And actually part of the problem we have at the moment, part of the issues that can surface are around expectation that, it was in Shopware 5, surely it's going to be in Shopware 6. It worked like this in Shopware 5, surely it should work like that in Shopware 6. And that's not the case, because actually what we've had to do is redesign a platform from the ground up to deal with what we think are going to be the challenges of e-commerce platforms going forward. And that's required. And there are reasons why we've done that. For instance, Shopware 5 had a sort of mishmash of different frameworks that were included in there to deal with quick coverage of pieces of functionality. Shopware 6 hasn't done that. It's stuck very rigidly to standard Symfony. Why? Because when you get into open source e-commerce platforms, you inevitably open yourself to the possibility of complexity. And one way we can add simplicity to the whole, keep things simple, is to keep to standards, to frameworks, sort of rigidly, rather than customize those frameworks. And that helps us. It helps agencies train developers, and it helps people adopt the platform more quickly. It helps keeps development time down on building extensions. So it takes that simplicity, because effectively the way I kind of see the e-commerce market, and I don't know, you probably think it the same way, is that actually a merchant, when they're approaching it, has to make a fundamental choice. between whether or not they optimize for simplicity or whether or not they optimize for flexibility.
Yeah.
And the guys that go for the simplicity are guys tend to get, tends to be the SaaS platforms, obviously, and they add flexibility by adding apps and APIs. And the complexity on the flexibility side, that tends to be the open source community more often than not. And they add simplicity by these extensions and apps and APIs as well, because we can standardize things down and through things like coding standards as well. So, and for me, that's what the merchant has to do, is they have to decide where they want to sit on that trade-off between simplicity and flexibility. Because I fundamentally believe it's virtually impossible to have, well, impossible-ish to have both. Impossible-ish. Well, that doesn't make any sense at all. But you know what I mean.
Word.
Anyway, so I mean, let's move into the main area. I think that obviously got your goat was the area of support.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, whatever it is you felt that it was unreasonable that even for our what we call our free to use, our open source platform, that people should pay for support. Is that correct?
No, not necessarily. It's obviously support is support, so it is a service in which you can charge for, and that's how most open source projects make money. So definitely, charging for support is not unheard of, and there's nothing wrong with that. This particular person that I was talking to was a part of a partnered agency with yourselves, with Shopware, and he was a developer working on quite a few Shopware projects, and he was very critical of the whole thing. He said, "I'm surprised you recommended Shopware," but I was like, it's got a great architecture. They've taken this risk in obviously now rebuilding to Shopware 6, and they've done it for the good of e-commerce. That's why I, in my first video, actually recommended it over Magento. But the second time was necessarily at this point, he gave me some feedback to say, "I'm surprised you recommended it," because they were partnered, so I imagine they're paying for the support and so forth. But if they asked any questions sort of outside of kind of certain boundaries, they would get a bill. And then I believe he also said that, with the bulk updating of products, as you've addressed this issue, it's something that you've really wanted. But he said that has been in there for such a long time. And I was like, oh, they're going to put it in. And he's like, but it's been in there for so long. So I guess this is one of the pitfalls of obviously moving your whole code base over to a new thing. But do you think there's any way in which you could potentially improve, let's say, support so that it's on a tiered system or a categorized system so that you can build up your support packages in a more modular way?
Let me just address two things. There's a very big difference between support and service level.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's separate those two things. First of all, Shopware supports all its customers, whoever it is. If there is an issue, there's an issue tracker system. You put the issue tracker in it. If it's surfaced before, if it seems important, then our developers deal with it. There is also a developer Slack, where if developers have issues that they are encountering, whether or not they're a partner, whether or not it's open source or whatever the implementation, they can put in what they're seeing, and either the community which consists in that channel as well. Oh, did I go?
You went a little bit there. Could you backtrace maybe 30
Sure.
seconds?
30 seconds. Where were we? So first of all, there was the issue tracker, which I talked about, where you can put you can put your issue. If you've got an issue, you put that in there. That is dealt with by our support department. So again, it's not dependent upon them having a paid installation at all. Obviously, it's up to us to decide how quickly we produce the patch for that, and it's all about prioritization. Is it important? Is it happening for multiple customers? Whatever it might be. But of course, we support that platform, because if there's a security issue, for instance, of course, we bring out a patch, and that patch is applied for all editions, whether they paid or not. And when there's updates and feature, that's quite often that's normally supplied to all as well. So from that point of view, we are supporting it on a day-to-day. We're evolving it. If we're seeing issues, we're dealing with those issues. If we've got security flaws, we're dealing with those security flaws and providing fixes out to our community. We also, as I said, we have a developer Slack where we have developers sitting in that channel, some of our core developers sitting in that channel, and the community, which again is most of our developers find very useful in terms of actually getting slightly more immediate, slightly more personalized support to particular issues that they're seeing. There is, and then there's the sort of the thorny problem of we move to the other side of the equation. Of course, there's documentation as well and videos, and those are available to all as well. So in terms of the support, in terms of getting going with the platform. Then there's the other side in terms of what's called SLA, service leveled support, i.e., I'm having an issue. I need a response on that issue in a certain time frame. And of course, our response to those types of requests are done, prioritized on the basis of the sort of license that they have. Because that is that is us saying, the whole point of, when someone takes a license with us with a support contract, it comes with as well, is that they have an expectation of how quickly we would respond to any particular issue. And, that is published as part of that license, and our developers get back to them based on those things. Now, what you've talked about was, it was outside the bounds of our support contract. So, you know how things, you probably know better than I am, and I do, because I'm not a developer. In fact, I used to run a Magento agency, so I've been working with developers for some years. But you'll probably know better than I do that, obviously that developers build on the basic platform. And once they've built on something, the basic platform, they then take on responsibility for that part of it. So yeah. If someone is saying, the minute we got beyond the bounds of what we see as our reasonable support sort of areas, we were asking for a charge, and not quite sure how this worked, but anyway, I'll assume that did happen, because it's very rare that it actually does happen. Then yes, we might well have turned around to them and said, look, if we're talking about this, this development that you may have done, which would certainly something that would take it outside the bounds of our support contract, then I'm afraid, we don't support that as part of this contract. We can get our developers or get our, what's called our customer success team. We can deploy them on there, but they are what for us is a very scarce resource, and is a resource that obviously we charge for. And for our larger customers, quite often what they say is that I want to take the license, I want to take a package of those guys, because I need them to help me architect the best solution, the best way to deploy our Shopware infrastructure in amongst what is likely to be, because this is what normally happens, in amongst what is likely to be an infrastructure that consists of several platforms, an ERP platform, some payment gateway infrastructure, accounting infrastructure, whatever else might be, marketing infrastructure as well. So absolutely, those guys are effectively development and e-commerce consultants that get deployed to help those types of customers with those kinds of problems.
Okay. So
and yes, it's at a charge. It's pretty bespoke, yeah. And there's a headline charge price for that. And of course, if we anticipate that it's going to be, a 3-day project, like any agency, really, we make a bespoke price, make a package that's appropriate to that customer.
Okay. So basically, if it's like an extensible part of the platform, I guess you could help if it's on the marketplace. But if it's something really bespoke,
well, if it's on the marketplace, then the guys who built that piece of code, that's their responsibility to deal with that piece of to deal with that piece of code. Now, what we do is we QC that thing, because of course what we want to do is lessen the times that some poor merchant. It's normally the merchant that ends up with us at the thick of it. It's like
Yeah.
the agency says it's their fault, and they say no, it's their fault, and they're just caught in the middle saying, makey worky, please, someone. What we do have this QC process to try and lessen the examples of effectively an agency or a merchant deploying a piece of code that doesn't frankly work. And of course, the other side we have is a trial basis, so they can, without paying, take that extension, put it in, make sure it works. Once they're happy with it, they say yes, I'll buy that module. Yeah. Does that help? Does that sort of clarify things slightly?
Yeah, absolutely. So it sounds like
I think the other side to this is that I don't think we're any different. And this is probably what got our goat slightly, is that, yeah, of course, there are times that when we have to say, look, guys, I'm sorry, but, you've bought this on an open source license, partner or not. If you need, specific advice on how you deal with something in that particular area, I'm afraid that is a chargeable event. I don't think we are any different to any of the other open source platforms out there that would deal with that in the same way. And we certainly don't aim to be. We're certainly not. We're certainly,
it is a business.
It's a business, but it's also a community, for instance.
Yeah.
So, we see our interests in prioritizing what's important for the community and trying to focus on that. B, trying to support. We have to prioritize everything. So. And B, we're not a publicly traded company. We're not hugely funded. We're completely organically grown. We haven't, we don't, we have to deal with the budgets and the size that we are. We're not the size of Shopify, and we're not the size of Adobe either. So, we have to prioritize based on what we think will work best for our community out there.
Definitely. Yeah, and I have worked for a Magento Platinum partner. And,
who's that?
It's I'll say it, Redbox. Redbox.
Oh right, okay. I know them well.
And they're a great company.
No, I know John T. well, and some of my old project managers went to work there as well.
John T. Yeah. Okay, so we do have some history in there. Okay, that's great.
Well, I used to run one of his. Well, he wouldn't see us as a competitor agency, but I did.
Competition is cool.
He would have thought we were the minnows, but he did come and poach a couple of my project managers. So that in itself was that was a compliment.
But yeah, I mean, I did work with them, and behind the scenes, at some point, Magento. I wasn't particularly impressed with Magento. I'm still not impressed with Magento. It just feels they can't really update without annoying a lot of customers. Two, I'm not necessarily a fan of how things are put together on the front end and the back end like this one is. It is a complete headless solution. You've taken the risk, and I think you deserve props for that.
Well, I'm going to correct you slightly. Actually, the front end that you see when you install when you install straight Shopware is not entirely headless. It is partially decoupled, I think it would be the best way to put it.
Oh, okay.
However, there is a PWA project that is entirely headless, and it is entirely, if you've got a sort of React front end that you want to plug in, you can plug that in. We've got a Vue, a Vue storefront, a Vue.js headless project that you can plug into Shopware. But the skin you load up when you load up Shopware, that is not a completely separate headless infrastructure. That is partially decoupled, and it is all called via API though. So you're absolutely correct in saying that.
I mean the core of your product is isolated, whereas in Magento that wouldn't be the case.
No, because this was created as an API first, as a sort of headless, sort of native, if you like, platform, and that's why. That's kind of. I mean, Magento had to do an awful lot to, when they went from Magento 1 to Magento 2, whether or not they did it as well as one would have liked, is it's constantly in debate. I think is the fairest way to put it. But they had to do the same thing. But they did that in 2000 and, between 2014 and 2016. And we did this in 2019, 20. So we're just further down the road, if you like, and technology's further down the road. And every now and then, I think you have to do this. And remember that what's hard for us is infinitely much harder for a proprietary software as a service platform. How those guys, it's very hard for them to evolve fundamentally. I mean, for instance, you only have to look at the difficulties that, say, Shopware and BigCommerce have in, say, launching sort of internationalization type facilities, language and multiple currencies, price pointed currencies. That shows you, they've been talking about this for years. It's hard to do that in a way that doesn't break everything for every customer out there, which of course they fundamentally can't do because they're all on the same platform.
Yeah, I mean they're very closely coupled, and everybody knows. It's kind of like putting a cup down and a window falling out in your shed. It's I've dealt with very tightly coupled code, as you can imagine, many times, and it creates an absolute headache. That's why I'm trying to teach people how to do front end engineering the right way and parallel everything, and really consider how you're fetching and importing data, and then how you display that data in a functional manner rather than keep editing, on the high level. And I think you guys have done a pretty good job being API first. I think Magento 2 was a spoilt opportunity because it didn't go down the full API route initially, and their marketplace now is full of tons of developers' time that you may annoy if you decide to go down that route. It's possible that they won't. It's not necessarily essential, but one beauty about your architecture is I could say, right, a back-end developer, you create a PHP plugin on the core, on that layer, and then I can get my front-end developer to go and integrate that onto the back-end and also onto the
Tell me what the endpoints are, and we're good to go. Exactly, that's it.
Exactly. And I'm assuming you've got like hooks and everything into the back-end interface as well. So it's literally... It's so easy, and I don't have to learn necessarily a specific API to do that, because if I wanted to hook into it, well, it's already built in Vue. So I'm not having to go into the core or extend a specific module. I can just say, right, this button, I can click that, then do this, or something like that. There's probably a better way to do it, but there is obviously it's a good architecture, and that's ultimately why I favored it initially. Then someone swayed my opinion, but I think you're swaying my opinion backwards.
Well, I don't know.
It doesn't sound unreasonable.
Well, the thing that video really tells me is that there is an unhappy partner of ours out there somewhere, which I don't know about, which is a failure of mine and my team's more than anything else. And so I will obviously you have to protect your sources as a journalist, but therefore my job is to go out there and find out who that was and make sure we can sort out what the issue was, and in a way that's equitable to both us in terms of running a business and them in terms of providing services to their merchants.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I mean that's pretty good, and it's the fact that you're willing to come on here. You're willing to,
as I say,
information.
Happy. I mean, we're happy to. I mean, from our point of view, we're not a huge platform in the UK. We're huge on the continent, but we're not a huge platform in the UK. And we're always keen if you've shown some interest and looking at the platform, we're to tell you what you need to know to move forward. And to that end, I mean, I have things like, as I say, the scorecard methodologies that is my opinion, and it is my opinion, but allows you to adapt it to how to determine best platforms for merchants, and also looks at one of the key areas that I think that people find Shopware interesting for, especially once they made the decision to go for the sort of flexibility side of the equation, and that's total cost of ownership. So and that's one thing we're quite confident of, that we come up quite appealing to those who need flexibility without delving into the costs that can be associated with sort of top end Magento development.
Yeah, I mean, Magento can be quite burdensome and expensive, and as you said, it's hard to evolve, so that will naturally add to cost. And then it can be a bit of a beast to work with. It's heavy. I've tried to work with it. It's heavy. And in some cases, as I said, working with that particular agency, costs could go quite high sometimes, quite rightly or wrongly, not necessarily Magento's fault. But because this system is more adaptable, you're less likely to get a bit of a shock if you need to upscale, and this system can go with that. And that's really there's some core principles that really miss out in e-commerce because it's such a fast-moving industry. It feels like flywheel development rather than somebody going, hold on a minute, you've gone a bit too far, restrain yourself, let's think about this a little bit better. So it's good that your company definitely has do that. I would say at this point I've changed my mind about yourselves and, you know, the platform. It does feel right. It did feel right initially. I think maybe someone's got to be in the bonnet, maybe a bit peeved, but, you know, that I can't speak for everybody or necessarily hand it over.
But you know how it is. Nothing is perfect.
Exactly.
And there are all kinds of things I would love if that, you know, we were further along the road than we are right now. But you know, we're moving along that road, and I, personally, you know, I think it's good road to be on. You know, because what I would love to, you know, what I would love to do, and what I would love Shopware to be, you know, part of, is to make the case for open source a bit better in the UK. Because I don't, you know, I think merchants hear the SaaS song all day about life can be simpler and life can be simpler, and they don't hear the open source song very much at the moment, especially now. Sort of Magento largely has moved out of the mid-market, and we'd love to be more prominent in making that case alongside hosting companies and payment gateways and technology agencies, because that's the other side. That's the other side of people who get made redundant by the SaaSification of everything. It's technology agencies, and these technology agencies, these are the innovators. These are the white heat of progress. So that we need these guys to keep moving e-commerce forward, you know, and into interesting ways. Sometimes it'll be red herrings, but sometimes, you know, these are the guys that are showing us sort of the next phase of e-commerce, which makes things so exciting.
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, speaking on that particular point, there was another agency that I spoke to. I fixed his server for him at one point. But he was like, I was like, well, why are you recommending? I'm getting into .NET development, things like that. But I said to him, why exactly? Well, I did have that opinion, but they.
You know how it is. No, it's just the other side, you know. It's a silly thing.
But I did say, why are you recommending these certain tool sets over open source tool sets? He was going for more proprietary Microsoft platforms, Azure. His Windows server was on it's Windows, and he said, well, because it sells well. Lots of companies want to hear that, especially I feel like governments and government agencies are kind of behind the curve because they always want to hear corporate names. They always want to hear the creme de la creme of the proprietary world, but are you prepared to listen to the open source world? It's a very difficult balance, but unless we get somebody who's really industry standard, I mean, the community edition of Magento does help, but I feel like a true open platform, not one that says, well, we'll give you this one for free, but we've got so much more over here that you've got to come onto our platform and it's proprietary. Would be nice, because I'm looking at scalability. So if I was to recommend this to a customer, I look at it from a technology point of view of upscaling, and two, will you be locked in later down the line, or could you just remain free and open? And I think companies undervalue that by a large part. And as you said, you know, it's cost a lot of people jobs and time and efficiency. So
yeah.
that is what's missing. It's a bit of a dinosaur industry, I have to say.
Yeah.
It just is. So, I promised at the start of this video that I was going to tell you why I changed my mind. Number one, they care about their community. I previously didn't think that, but they have their own channels and they have their own support channels, even for the free version. Not just the paid for version, but the paid for version gives you more options. They are a company and they do need to make money. And I'm not against it. I think their support is pretty reasonable. Maybe what this company was asking for was a bit more. This company did mention the features, and they've openly admitted that they've wanted this for a long time and it hasn't come. Developer resources are stretched. So I'm going to give them an A+. They totally changed my opinion and my mindset on this particular issue. I think they do care. And I think that they do have a relatively great product. I think there could be things better, but they've definitely changed my mind. I think you should install Shopware, and I definitely get a WordPress vibe when I install it. So, now that we have that in place, what are the constructive criticisms of this platform? It's fair to give my advice on it. I do consult, so here's my consultancy for them for free. Personally, I don't think you should be maintaining an old front-end technology. This is just entertaining a bad idea, and I'll tell you why. Number one, all the companies that go to agencies who can afford an agency to build their website, which is predominantly going to be Shopware and so forth, they don't want PHP websites. They don't want the traditional application types versus the single page application type. Single applications are faster, they're more fluid, they're easier to develop in, and if you do the job properly, they will fly past the traditional technology. Two, why shouldn't you encourage it? Because of marketplace. If you're selling front-end modules, you're going to end up splitting your marketplace, okay? And this usually doesn't end up as a good thing because you know, you really want people to focus on one technology. It's when those companies come up with a million tech stacks that eventually people go, I've had enough of this, and you've thrown it in the bin. You know, and it's not just tech stacks that do this, it can also be marketplaces. If you have a marketplace that supports a traditional PHP front end and an SPA, some people buy their own product, some people get upset. Obviously you got the 30-day free trial, but the whole point is it makes life just that little bit more difficult. And you'll become fractured as a result. Two, there's no reason not to go with, three, no reason not to go with SPA. As I said, it brings all those benefits, but the main benefit that it also brings is the fact that you get more programming resources naturally. Think about this. If, for example, you get rid of the traditional API in PHP, that's one less thing you maintain. You could trim your code base by probably hundreds of lines if you did that. And the beauty about doing it that way in PHP is that really you're just focusing on the GraphQL API or potentially the REST API. And that's another criticism. I'd rather see GraphQL as well as REST. There's no reason why you shouldn't be able to have both. But the thing is, when you get rid of that legacy API, the sort of older PHP styled front ends, you'll get more resources to look into adapting the REST API and building the GraphQL API so that they can both work together. And it's possible. Systems can use REST and GraphQL. If you give two options, that is very, very impressive. And GraphQL lets us make less requests instead of REST. REST, sometimes we have to fetch something and then we have to do something else. You know what I mean? So my professional opinion would be, don't fracture your marketplace, keep your development time up, and focus more primarily on the APIs of the future and the technologies of the future. If Shopware 5 and Shopware 6 were such a big leap for you in the back end, but you're still letting people build front ends in old technologies, this might not be the way to go. And hopefully, eventually they will go that way. It definitely feels like that's the way they're going to go. But my point is, if you're going to make that leap and you've invested all this time and money into this product, don't keep doing that because people will eventually get upset with you. They've built all this beautiful storefront. Now they've got to rebuild it in React or Vue. So that causes a big derision in people, and especially developers, because developers don't want to develop. They want to do a lot less development, and they want to go and eat some ice cream somewhere, and development's already quite a stressy business. So there is my professional opinion. There is why I changed my mind, but there is also my supportive criticism for your future. And thank you for watching this video. If you want more great content, go ahead and hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, ding dong that bell. And I want to say thank you very much for watching this video.